In my 6 years as a product manager at a major technology company that deals in PCs and enterprise infrastructure, I've had the opportunity to manage portfolios ranging from $10 million a year all the way up to $500 million a year in revenue with some of our mainstream laptop computers. And in that time, I learned quite a bit what it means to be a product manager, the influence one can have on a business, and the true scope of what all a product manager can be involved in. In this video, I'm going to share with you my 3 top lessons learned so that if you happen to be interested in a product management role or you happen to be there now, you will know what to expect. So let's get to it. First, what does a product manager really do? There's a popular notion out there that the product manager is the CEO of a product. In my humble opinion, I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but there is a kernel of truth to it. It's true in the sense that both of them have a responsibility of maximizing the P&L, which is the profit and loss statement of their business. And both of them are engaged to one degree or another with most or all parts of the value chain, meaning that they talk with everyone that can impact the business. That goes all the way from engineering all the way to customers and everyone in between, like sales, marketing. They do this so they can get the full picture of the business so that they can make the best possible decisions. Now, the similarities largely end there because, of course, CEOs have a lot more influence. They have both formal and informal authority. And ultimately, when it comes to decision making, they have the final say. Whereas product managers, they can still have influence, it just takes a little bit more work. And depending on the size of the company, the circumstances, oftentimes the product manager does not have the absolute final say when it comes to certain matters of the product or the business. So with that said, what does the product manager actually do? And it boils down to this statement. It means you're taking any and all actions necessary to grow the business of your product line. This is done through understanding your customers, the market, your product, and the stakeholders you work with to influence a course of action that's going to give the product the best chance of success. Now, if that seems pretty broad, it's because it is. So let me give some examples that are a part of the next lessons learned. You've got to think about every business function that could possibly have an impact on the financial success of a product. And in my time, I've worked closely with customers to understand what their pain points were and how our products could potentially solve them. Better yet, I was able to understand the specific features that a customer actually values, which the translation of that is what a customer is willing to pay for. This is what helps determine what features get built into a product. Every new or changed feature comes with a cost. And if a customer doesn't value that feature enough to be willing to pay a little bit more for it, then it may not be worth building in that feature at this point in time. You will have unnecessarily raised the cost to produce this product without actually being able to capture the value from it, which ultimately means less margin for the company. And I've had to build out business cases as to why certain features were worth the investment. And to do so, you of course need some data to back that up. You also need some consistent customer feedback that leads you in that direction to explore that option. And if it got approved, now it's time to think about how to go to market. How do you market this feature, or really the entire solution set with that feature, to the broader audience? Part of it is crafting a compelling message that would go out through traditional marketing channels. But the other part of it, especially in B2B, is equipping sales makers with the knowledge that they need to have an effective conversation with the customer about the value that the product and its features can bring to the customer. Or put simply, how can this product solve their problems? And then you have to ensure that the product is priced appropriately in the market. And in my case, where I dealt with physical product, supply chain is also another major consideration. Making sure that the right signals are being sent to manufacturers at the right time to get the right amount of product at another right time later in the future. This is the full picture you want to seek out as a product manager. But there's one more thing. If you're at a small company, you might be wearing a lot of different hats. You might be working directly and consistently with the customers themselves. You might also be working with engineering directly. You may even be an engineer yourself. You may be solely responsible for all marketing of the product, in which case you probably have a lot more decision-making authority. But in my case, I worked for a company that has well over 100,000 employees globally. There's a ton of complexity inherent in a business that big with that many dollars at stake. So if you're at a large company, you may want to refer back to what I mentioned earlier, which is you may not have the final sole decision-making authority on a handful of different matters, but you can have influence, which is the next lesson here. All the business functions I mentioned earlier are actually made up by teams that handle those functions directly. Many times the goals of the product manager and the goals of those in those business functions are aligned. However, that's not always the case. For example, supply chain may be focused on reducing liability of overstocking products. That is to say, buying too many products, having them on stock without the ability to fully sell through all of them in a timely fashion. Whereas the product manager, they want to ensure that they have plenty of product on hand just in case that there's a really large opportunity out there that the company can fulfill. Another example might be that engineering is looking to reduce the cost of building the product. And they do this in many ways, but one way is simplifying the product design, but also sometimes limiting the feature set. Whereas the product manager may want the product to be a little bit more feature rich to address possible gaps in the market. For every situation where goals may differ slightly, and among many other situations I'm sure, this is where you need to build influence. So how do you build influence as a product manager? Well, it's really not all too different than being in sales and building a relationship with a customer. First and foremost, you need to understand what it is that that person cares about. What are their goals? What problems do they have? How is their success measured by their leadership? This is a matter of asking those questions and listening intently. Once you know that, then you have to ask yourself, how can I help them achieve their goals? How can I add value to them in some way? And it is within that context that you ask yourself, how can I achieve my goals within that framework? How can I make this a win-win situation for everyone involved? And as you work with those groups and you build those relationships, you want to make it clear to them that you know what they care about. And you also make it clear that in any course of action that you're trying to pursue, that doing so is going to not only help the company achieve its goals, but it's going to help them achieve their goals as well. Now, this is how you start to build influence. And the way you continue to build influence is by stringing together a series of interactions and events like that. Every action that I wanted to pursue as a product manager became progressively more easier to negotiate and work through. Now, it didn't necessarily mean that I got everything I wanted without any issue, because sometimes in the course of discussion and debate with those other groups, I realized my idea is probably not the best. I've overlooked a few details here. But it did mean that the interactions were highly collaborative and very productive. And that's because I had great relationships with everyone that I worked with. And they knew that any idea that I had, I kept their concerns and their considerations in mind when thinking of the idea. So as a product manager, you're looking at the business end to end to make the best decision possible. And making good decisions stems from having strong, solid data. It's also customer feedback that you're getting. It's your ability to work with different groups to understand different perspectives so that you get the full picture and you can arrive to the best possible conclusion. And if there's an action that you feel strongly about, then it's a matter of influencing the organization, influencing other teams to proceed with that action. You have the opportunity to learn an incredible amount about a business in this type of role, and you also happen to have an outsized impact probably more than most any other role I could think of. So if you want to learn more about the roles and responsibilities of a product manager, I would recommend you check out this next video here. Or if you want to put yourself in the best position to land a product manager role, you may want to consider an MBA, and I've got another video on that as well. And if you want to brush up on your education of a product manager, perhaps get a certificate under your belt, check out the link below where I've got a few course tracks that I recommend that you might want to look into. It's a little bit more focused on software product management, but nonetheless, it will be helpful.